Welcome to Between Two Chairs, Demystifying Commercial Real Estate, the podcast that brings you the latest insights and trends on the South Florida commercial real estate market, with your hosts, Fernando Arencibia Jr. and Jennifer Woolman. In each episode, we dive into the world of commercial real estate and break down complex concepts to make them accessible for everyone. Whether you're a real estate professional, a curious investor, or just interested in the South Florida market in general, Between Two Chairs is the podcast for you. So pull up a chair and join us.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Between Two Chairs. My name is Fernando Arencibia Jr., and with me is the colorful Jennifer Woolman.
You're a little tongue-tied this
morning,
Fernando.
There was so many words coming through my mind, and it was something to do with pastels and colors and vibrancy, and I was like, colorful. So there you go. The good thing is that Karina's going to shorten that that pause. No, she'll leave it in.
She'll leave it in. It's authentic, right?
I love it. We are in the midst of the throes of conference season, and Jennifer and I just came back from Florida Realtors annual convention, and Jennifer also attended ICSC Orlando, and we thought we'd kind of give you a little bit of a sneak peek behind the scenes, a little rundown of some of the things that were discussed, some of the things that are happening, and just kind of giving you a little insight into the vibe of some of these conferences. I thought it was really interesting that, you know, as it happens, it seems very, very common that both conferences either happen one before the other or one after the other. But this time they were all at the same time. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that was fun. I spent a lot of time running back and forth and Uber money going back and forth between ICSC and Florida Realtors.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, it was good. It was actually, I liked the experience of having them both overlapping, because usually there's like a 2 or 3 day break in between, and this way there was actually a lot more almost like cross-pollination between people who normally would only go to one or the other, being able to take advantage of both, and people from Florida Realtors who might dabble in commercial or do commercial but not go to ICSC were able to do that. So it was really nice.
For anyone in our audience who doesn't know what ICSC stands for, what does ICSC stand for?
So it's the International Council of Shopping Centers, and it's an organization that mostly deals with retailers.
Right. And when you have this conference, which the largest conference is in Vegas, that's the national conference, right, but every year there is this statewide conference in Orlando. Tell me a little bit about who actually shows up to the ICSC conference.
So it's interesting because they do have, as you said, the biggest one is in Vegas, and I've never been to that because I've never, I'm focused mostly on Florida real estate, and I don't deal with the big nationals on a regular basis. So I always go to the Orlando one, and then they have others throughout the state. Throughout the country, there's an ICSC New York. Yeah. I think there's one in Atlanta. So all over they have their local ones, but this one you get a really good mix of everything. A lot of people who show up in Vegas are also here. A lot of the national retailers that are expanding in the state of Florida are here. Obviously, brokerages, big and small, and individual brokers and agents are also there. I love that we've been seeing more and more economic development groups from different cities showing up. That's been great because, as you and I always say, you need to know those people that are in the markets that you serve. So that was great. This year I saw some that I haven't seen before, as well as some who are always there that we've heard of, like Northport is doing great. They were there again this year. Coral Springs was there. There were just a bunch of them. So that was really interesting. I liked seeing the fact that there were more. And then obviously, the support services that you get, photographers and
all the vendors
right, and property management companies, etc.
Now, it's really interesting because ICSC has a reputation as a conference that this is a conference that you could actually get deals done. You could actually do business. Most conferences, people speak about either the keynote speaker or the presentations or the education or, the networking. But ICSC does have the reputation. So for people who haven't been to ICSC, I think that they imagine that there's just a lot of deal-making rooms that are happening at the same time. How is that experience? Is it purely a lot of the booths that are set up and everybody's just kind of showcasing their property? Are there also educational classes? Are there, panels and stuff like that?
So it's set up in a huge, in the convention center, the Orlando Convention Center, in one of the big rooms. And the center is mostly vendors and booths and companies that have booths. Then on the outside, you have the retailer runway, which are little booths. They're not even really booths. They look like little ticket counters at a carnival, where the retailers that want to expand are. So you can go up and meet with them and see what they're looking for, what their specifications are. And then there's like 2 to 3 areas where they have ongoing educational sessions at the same time. And then all the way in the back, there's one big open area with a bunch of tables for random meeting and deal making. But yeah, to your point, a lot of the shopping center owners are there, either selling or looking to buy. So they've got their properties on display. So yeah, it's very, very busy, super, super active. And this year I didn't feel like there were as many people. I didn't feel as much traffic, but I felt like there was a lot more activity, a lot more one-on-one conversations. You saw a lot of people, coming by and asking questions or wanting to meet with you.
Did you see a lot of new faces?
I did, actually. Yeah. I saw a lot of new faces, a lot of who were either our agents or agents that used to work with us, and that was really cool. A lot of younger agents, a lot of students. They do a doo-doo. That sounded like it was incorrect, but no, that was a correct sentence.
That was
Sorry,
correct,
my AI isn't working today. So they do have scholarships for students. So there were a lot of students there from the different colleges and schools of real estate, which to me is great. Really exciting because I notice, especially at something like Florida Realtors or just in my sphere, right? We're an older group, right? My sphere is an older group. And when you look at the average age of a real estate agent, it's up there. So to see young people coming in and getting involved and being excited about real estate was really neat.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I asked you about the new faces is that I took the Bride Line up to Orlando on the day that both conferences were beginning, and I saw a lot of brokers that were there that were either had not been in years, had never been, but all of them this was their first time taking the train as well. So it was a cool experience. And we got to chat and connect and talk about, properties that they have available and changes in their professional life and new things that they're doing. So it was really cool. And I kind of felt like, these are faces I haven't seen going to ICSC in a minute. So it was great to see a lot of new faces. And I was telling you before we started the podcast, I spoke to a broker that we're working on a deal together in Miami Beach. And I asked them about the experience, and there was like a long pause, so I thought it was going to be like a negative response, but his response was like, it was wonderful. And he was sharing with me that he had gone to ICSC Vegas a couple of years ago, and he felt like totally unprepared just because of the sheer size, the breadth of it, and didn't get a lot of connections. He didn't make a lot of connections. He says that in Orlando, it was the opposite, that it was great. Number one, to meet people that they had done deals with, but they had never met the owners of the company, other brokers that they had interacted maybe online, but never really met in person. So it was really cool. And I told everybody, I don't think anybody in ICSC had as much fun as my partner Jennifer, because she stayed in a sorority house, right, with 15 other women that are powerhouses in commercial real estate. Was that the CRE sorority house?
It was. That was what Hugh Chen dubbed it anyway, lovingly dubbed it. And I've never been a part of a sorority. I wasn't part of a sorority in college, but this was a lot of fun. And it all happened because a bunch of us had missed the deadline to get into the main hotel. So I just booked at the hotel where Florida Realtors was and thought no big deal. But Beth Azor, God bless her, and all of her event planning mode. And I guess she had stayed at this house a while back for a different conference and said it was amazing and the connections you make. So Michelle said, oh, well, you should do it for ICSC. So that crazy little one-off conversation turned into a let's do it for ICSC. And I got to tell you, staying in a house with a bunch of women, many who I didn't know or who I only knew kind of on the periphery, was so much fun. Because first of all, we ate amazingly because everyone brought something from their favorite retailer, right? So you had all sorts of great independent donuts and cookies and, you know, the Gray's Craze and all that kind of stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But then what was super cool about this, and I was just thinking about this, talking to you and hearing you talk about the person who you're doing the deal with, because I met him and we were just having a conversation, and then I saw who he was from, and I'm like, oh, you must know Gus Fonte. He knew Gus Fonte. And then we start talking, and I said, oh, and Fernando. He's like, I'm doing a deal with Fernando. So, and that is the opportunity in these smaller conferences to really build relationships. For sure. So the house obviously definitely did that, right? I mean, we got to, and this is a group of women who go to the Women Investment Summit that I have been, you know, raving about every year. So we were talking about investments that we've done, what we're looking for. Same thing, you know, during ICSC, you talk about what you're looking for, what you have, what tenants you need to fill, etc. And then, you know, with Martin, that was a prime example of the type of conversations. And I had another one of those in the hallway of Florida Realtors where I was talking with Eric Firestone, who happens to work also with Avanti Way, but in a different capacity. And we're talking and just bonding and talking about our dogs and everything. And, you know, I find out that he plays, you know, music and he sings and speaks a million languages, well, 5 actually. And turns out that we know somebody in common, dear friends of mine or dear friends of his, but those types of things happen at these conferences if you participate and get out of your comfort zone and talk to people that you don't know.
Yeah, I had a conversation with a potential client. He's been looking for, you know, a very specific, you know, he has a very specific criteria for industrial space, but he has basically spoken to every commercial broker in Miami who does industrial. And he was, you know, rattling all these names and whatever. And he was telling me, I'm really concerned because you guys all know each other. You know, I told this guy that I was meeting with you and he knew you. And now I'm telling you about all the people I talked to, you know, everybody knows each other. And I think his concern was like, well, it just kind of feels like, you know, he was just concerned about the fact that, hey, you guys all know each other. You know, am I going to get the right deal? Am I going to be properly represented? And I said, this is a very small community. And no one lasts in this community if they try to screw over people, right? If they try to do the wrong thing for clients, if they try to do the wrong things for brokers, I don't care who you are. You might get away with it once, but you're not going to get away with it twice, you know. And there's something really powerful about that, and you really quickly develop a reputation about how you communicate with each other, how knowledgeable you are, how deep your relationships are with the people that you serve. So it really is cool. So, of course, ICSC is happening at the same time as Florida Realtors. Florida Realtors does this annual conference. There were a lot of cool things this year. You know, one of the things is that they have created this thing called Florida Realtors Live, which I really love because now we have about 2,000 people that show up to the conference every year. It's a 2-day conference. But with Florida Realtors Live, they were able to do interesting interviews about the state of the market, the state of our industry, all those cool things. And then they were broadcasting it live to Facebook and LinkedIn and YouTube. And now they're actually going to take some of those, you know, videos, and you're going to see some of those interviews.
Oh, good. I was going to ask. They did it live, but did they record them? Because I was running back and forth.
No, for sure.
I missed John Crossman, who I wanted to see. You will. And I'll talk about him because he gave a great presentation.
You'll be able to hear it, which is wonderful, and you know, and it brought that in. And you know, I looked at the slate of classes. So as you could imagine, a lot of classes on AI. But there were a lot of classes on process and structure and systems, and there were a lot of classes on ROI, which I thought, was really interesting, the dynamics of how those things were there. And really classes about building wealth, classes about retirement, about exit plans for your company. I mean, it kind of took them gamut. It just got me thinking, because I went to a couple of these sessions, and the AI sessions were full packed. Especially there was an early session on YouTube and AI that was really interesting, and it seemed to be very captivating. I mean, it was standing room only, and it was a big room. And I found that our conversations on AI has evolved so much, because at first there was a lot of fear, there was a lot of hesitation, and most of the presentations that we were getting were about AI is not going to replace you, relax, but an agent that works with AI and knows how to use AI will replace a broker who doesn't use AI and all that stuff, which, it's a cute way of saying it. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's true, but it does really feel like everybody in the world, to a degree, I mean, it just feels like that. I'm sure it isn't, but has embraced AI in one form or another. Even those that are only using it to a limited capacity, there seems to be an embrace of AI. I don't know if you noticed that. And
I didn't go to any of the classes because I was
you were, of course.
I was going back and forth. I spend a lot of time in Uber.
Uber bill is going to be high.
With Uber.
Exactly.
But one of the things that I found super powerful, and you and I have spoken about this earlier, was that we had such huge legislative wins with Florida Realtors this year that there wasn't, like, all of our business meetings. Usually our business meetings are, okay, what do we present? What issues are we seeing? What problems do we need to address for our members, either on a legislative scale, a process scale, or whatever? And this year the meetings were pretty quick. So I think, what I noticed is the quality of the speakers that we had were like mind-blowing. So many of my ICSC friends were upset when I said, I gotta go. I can't meet at this time. I've got to go see Marcus Lemonis. They're like, Marcus Lemonis? Yeah. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, well, how do we get in? And I'm like, well, you got to be a Florida.
Exactly. That's right.
So anyway, this year, President Tim Weishire's theme for Florida Realtors is Champions for the American Dream. And I love that because we have so many conversations about affordability and home ownership and how many people are renters, et cetera. And we're going to do another session on that and what that means based on some commentaries that I've read recently in terms of the wealth gap between boomers and younger generations, et cetera. But he spoke obviously about how that theme translated into our legislative wins. So in addition to a bunch of wins that we had for the residential side, home ownership and home strengthening and the environment, because we know those of us who live here and visit here know that the environment is a huge, huge part of what makes us attractive. But he also highlighted how many legislative wins we had on the commercial side. Yeah. And a lot of people who aren't Florida Realtors, and I'll get into this later also because I had this conversation many times at ICSC, don't understand that Florida Realtors is not just a residential real estate organization. Yeah. We are a property rights advocacy group that spans everything related to private property. Yeah. And one of the things that I love about Tim is that because he does both residential brokerage and commercial brokerage, and he's extremely successful with the commercial side of what he's done up in Central Florida with developments and land entitlement and everything else, is that he sees the connection and he's able to communicate that. Yeah. And I think a lot of both realtors and non-realtors, just real estate agents and brokers, put a fine line between residential real estate and commercial real estate. Mm-hmm. And I understand the reason for doing that related to how you conduct business because they are totally different, right? Yeah. Different forms, different processes, different reasons behind it, finances, et cetera. So that part I get. But in reality, all real estate is interrelated. So he went over the commercial wins, which included repealing of the business rent tax and the local, not ordinance, what is it, the local addition that they would do to the local
tax
percentage that they put, that a lot of counties put on top of the business rent tax. So the repeal of this tax alone has saved businesses $2.5 billion with a B dollars since we started chipping away at it when it was over 6%, and this year alone it's $900 million. We also help protect private property rights with commercial building and short-term rental owners that deal with squatters, making it easier to get rid of them and evict them, and then also helping landlords and tenants communicate through email once everybody agrees. So now you don't have to have the certified mail and everything else. So that was pretty much the highlights of the business work that we got done this year. But then the keynote by Marcus Lemonis, it wasn't anything that I expected.
Well, but before you get there, I'll just say that to your point, we're still seeing the positive ramifications of the full elimination of the business rent tax. We're kind of evaluating its effect on the marketplace. Not really evaluating about because it's effective October 1st,
right,
which is right around the corner. Then that's where you'll begin to see. But it's interesting because we're actually working on a lease where we're representing the tenant. It's a small space, 1,800 square feet, but over the course of a 5-year period, the tenant is going to save $36,400
right
in that 5-year period from what would have been
a tax on top of a tax.
Of a tax, right? And to the point of Senator Pizzo, who clearly got it right, which is it's a tax that is not related to any value that is given back to the people that are paying the tax. It's not like a tax on roads and now the roads are better.
Right.
You don't really get anything from that tax other than it's just a tax.
Right.
So yeah.
Even though I know a lot of counties, Miami-Dade County kind of said, well, since they repealed this tax, we have a budget hole. But spending.
Yeah, exactly.
That's your budget hole.
Spending money. Yeah. Well, that's not.
But anyway, we won't.
Well, they got other things that they have to deal with. Yeah, for sure at the county.
So,
but tell me about Marcus Lemonis. I thought that was cool.
First of all, it was great to see him, and he was just
very personable, right?
Super personable.
Yeah.
He was wandering the crowd, and some people were even like, "Excuse me," trying to get him out of the way because he had a crowd, and then they'd turn around and see who it was, right, and they'd be like, "Oh, selfie!" So that was kind of funny. But the presentation itself wasn't what I expected at all. Right? I expected that he was going to talk about his people, process, and product, or what he's famous for, the 3 Ps, or business framework, or something like that. And he got super personal, almost like a psychologist. And the person next to me actually said, wait, is he a licensed psychotherapist? And I'm like, I have no idea. But he what he was doing was tying in the theme of the American dream and champions of the American dream into his speech and how it related to him. And he spoke about how he, tried to get his license twice and failed. So he's not a licensed realtor or real estate agent, but how the most impactful best day of his life was when he bought his first home. Totally broke, didn't think it was going to happen. He said, I can't remember, interest rates were high, prices were low. Like, you always have these excuses, and the things that you hear in today's market are the same that he heard in 1995. But he said that buying that home started him off on his journey of wealth building and bigger homes and stability and community and everything else. So I loved that. And
I thought he was very inspirational, and I thought he spoke a little bit about how, sometimes in the media over the last couple of years, the realtor has gotten punched, a bit.
Beat up a bit.
And he spoke about the true value that real estate agents across the country provide to their communities and to the local economy and to the fabric of America. So, I thought, and to your point, it was a very different presentation. I also thought that we would jump a little more into that people, process, profit, and, that kind of approach. But it was a great experience. And, I got to meet him, and he is, I think, who he is on TV. I mean, what you see is what you get.
And he's a homegrown Miami boy, so we can kind of claim ownership with Columbus and all of of the Columbus
exactly.
boy fans were doing their little C hands.
Exactly. We bonded over Little Havana, and and he did a program where he highlighted Little Havana, and that was really, really good. Right around the time of the pandemic. So I was very appreciative of that, and I shared that with him. But yeah, it was a very cool experience for sure.
My two takeaways from him was that he said that human beings are supposed to be human information magnets, collecting data on how to relate to other people and other humans. And, nowhere is that more true than in real estate, right? We are a product of our relationships. And he also said to give people a chance when nobody else will. And that stuck on me based on some of what I heard and saw at ICSC when it comes to mom and pop businesses, which we'll get into in that other episode that you know nothing about that I'm putting together in my head as we're talking. Anyway, so those were my two takeaways from him. Then we also had a great speaker with Newt Gingrich where Tim interviewed him, and he spoke about creating economic growth, dealing with welfare reform, and creating efficiencies as a way to get us on the road to a balanced budget. Yeah. And my favorite takeaway from his interview was when Gingrich quoted a friend of his, who he didn't name, who said that instead of thinking outside of the box, realize there is no box. And I loved that because earlier in the year, I think at midwinter meeting, we had heard from another speaker. I just drew a blank, the guy who did the cool T-shirts, and he was talking about how you need to think within the box, like what, you need to solve problems within your box framework. But I like there is no box way better.
Yeah, there seems to be a lot of box analogies.
There's a lot of
box metaphors.
Yeah. So that's why I like blow away the box.
My favorite thing about listening to Newt Gingrich was his description of Congress. And basically he says the House is 435 high school presidents. Yeah. Congress is a country club, and every senator every morning combs the hair of a future president, and they all believe they would do a better job if they were president. So I thought that was, that was so great. I also really enjoyed he also has ties in Florida, and, he's got family that live down here in Miami, and he lives in Florida, and he was saying, it is as important to support legal immigration as it is to oppose illegal immigration. And, I thought that was a really good, really, really cool thing. So as always, very impactful presentations, very impactful speakers. My biggest takeaway from Marcus Lemon is really just his entire vibe is about you got to get comfortable with being yourself in your own skin, and and the way that he kind of conveyed that by the way he was talking to us and the way he was speaking, and that was wonderful. All right. So
wait. Don't start wrapping up. I got another speaker.
Oh, okay. Oh, my bad.
So I have two more. One I'm going to save for the next one that you know nothing about. But,
all right, I know nothing about it. I love it.
Terry Morrison, who is the author of Kiss, Bow, or Shake Hands, spoke at our global committee meeting, and she's amazing. I've read her book. I read her book a long time ago. And if you travel, or you live in Florida, or you live anywhere in the United States where there are international people, you have to read this book, because one of my key takeaways that she's mentioned before is that 95% of the world's population lives outside of the United States. And it's easy for us as Americans who live here or travel, and most people, when you travel, speak English or make an attempt to speak English, to be a little bit self-centered and not as aware of other people's customs. So I thought that was super interesting. 95% of the world's population lives outside of the U.S. And that you need at least three things, our favorite number 3, to connect with people. So whenever you're meeting with somebody, connect on a personal level with 3 things. And then finally, she has the book out, but she also has one that relates relates to the courtroom and one for sales and marketing. So,
well, I love there were so many people with the book around. They were all so happy.
Yes, because
they love the presentation.
It's amazing. And you think of faux pas that you can make or things that are, common in one area aren't in another. And it's funny because I was watching on Monday or Tuesday, I don't even remember what day of the week it is anymore, that everything that's going on with the meeting between Putin and, Russia, China, India, and South Korea. And I was watching some of the stuff and I'm like, ooh, that's a no-no. That's a taboo. And you could see the body language on the different people when one of the other leaders was committing a faux pas. But so that was really funny. So, and finally, the last one was from John Crossman, founder and president of Crossmark Services. That's a well-known commercial real estate advisory and brokerage firm in Central Florida. Yeah. We heard from him, great takeaways, but if you want to hear what they are, you have to tune in next time.
Ooh, I love it. I love it. That's a cliffhanger. There you go. That's awesome. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us on this episode of Between Two Chairs. We are going to leave it right there, hanging in the balance.
And if since we are in the middle of conference season, when you hear this, if you hear of some cool conferences that you go to that you think are worthwhile, let us know. I do want to let our local Florida listeners know that there is an ICSC Fort Lauderdale called Retail Forward South Florida coming up in November 3rd at the Fort Lauderdale Marriott Harbor Beach Resort and Spa, if you want to go to that. And then personally, next week, I am off over to Palm Desert in California, not the easiest place in the world to get to or from, but going there for the CREI Summit, which is a conference for commercial real estate people and social media, something I'm extremely uncomfortable with. And so I'm gonna dive into my uncomfortable zone.
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, and I'll let you know how that goes.
Exactly. All right, guys, that's an episode right there. All right, Jennifer, say bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.